Welcome everyone to the eMedica GP Training Essentials webinar on how to get into GP training in 2024. So in terms of the format today, we're going to split into three sections. Part one, I'm going to give you an overview of the process to get into GP training for 2024. Part two, I'll look at the key changes that are going to impact you for this year, the frequently asked questions about the process and about the exams, and then the eMedica courses and resources that we have that have been helping doctors to not just get in, but get their first choice jobs for more than a decade. Part three is where we'll take questions and answers. Okay, so let's make a start with an overview of the process to get into GP training. So there's 4 stages to the process. Stage one is the application and the long listing process. So the applications are opening on the 26th of October and they close on the 23rd of November. So if you don't get your application in within that period, you've missed this round. Okay, this is round one, which is the largest round. Every area will be recruiting. Stage two, so what they'll do is they'll look at your application and see, do you meet the eligibility criteria? The application isn't scored in any way, unlike some specialties. For GP, the application is really just checking, do you meet the criteria? If you meet the criteria, you'll be longlisted and you'll be invited to book for the MSRA. Okay, so the invitations will come out around the 14th of December, but the actual exam is from the 4th to the 16th of January 2024. And when you get that invitation, you'll be able to choose which date and which location you want to sit the exam. Okay, stage three are then the job offers, which are based on your score and rank. And the first offers will start coming out on the 4th of March 2024. After that, stage four is a pre-employment check. So they will check your references, they will start allocating rotations, they will check things like you need a police check and all of this other paperwork to get you ready to start training. Okay, so this will happen throughout April, May and June, and then the jobs start first Wednesday of August 2024. Okay, so they're the 4 stages. All right, so I'll go through each of them in a bit more detail, but first, just how many jobs? Round one is the main round. Every deanery recruits in round one. There are over 4,000 jobs expected for 2024 entry, and round one jobs always start August 20, in this case 2024, but they always start in August. Okay, round two, which is running at the moment, as in the offers are running at the moment, there's some jobs that are specifically for round two, and there's some jobs that are left over from round one, where someone accepted a job and then they got ill or something happened and they couldn't take up the job and it was too late to offer that to someone else and do the pre-employment check. So it goes to round two. So you have a mixture of leftover jobs and jobs specific to round two, but there's very few jobs, somewhere between 400 to 600 jobs. In some rounds there's been less than 400 jobs. Okay, so you can see somewhere 10 to 12% of the jobs that we see in round one. And so round two is even more competitive than round one, and round one has become increasingly competitive the last few years. So the jobs for round two will start in February. The applications usually happen around July, MSRA around September. Okay, so that's next year. The dates haven't been confirmed for next year yet. So in terms of competition, GP remains the most popular specialty, and the levels of competition have been increasing over the sort of last 5 years, but hugely the last 2 years. This is data I've gathered from official sources for the last 5 round one recruitments. So if you look at 2019, just over 5,000 people applied for about 3,800 jobs. Okay, so the ratio was 1.34. Pretty much everyone that passed got a job. Okay, 2020, this was the last year, because after round one is when the pandemic started and they shut down. Okay, this was the last year where they still had selection centers after MSRA. They also had like communication skills and OSCEs and things. Okay, so just under 5,800 applied for a similar number of jobs. So the competition's gone up 1.5 to 1. Okay, 12% increase in applicants and competition. 2021, huge increase, 7,640 people applied for 4,200 jobs. So it's gone up to nearly 1.8. So nearly 20% increase in competition, because nearly 30% increase in applicants, more than 30%. 2022, even bigger. Over 8,500 people applied for slightly fewer jobs, 4,100 odd jobs. First time ever in the last 18 years that I've been doing this, that the competition ratio for GP was over 2 overall. Okay, within some specific areas like London, it's even more than that. Okay, and then This year, round one, over 10,500 people applied for GP training for less than 4,000 jobs. So the competition was, 2.67 to 1. If you look at this, since 2019, the competition has doubled. The number of applicants gone from 5,100 to over 10,500. Okay, there's lots of reasons for that. So last year, core surgical training started using MSRA. The competition ratios for things like surgical training, radiology, ophthalmology have gone up hugely. Psychiatry have gone up hugely. As a result, some doctors that were applying to these other specialties that use MSRA, a lot of people would also apply to GP or psychiatry as a backup because they're sitting the MSRA anyway. Now, if they then didn't get radiology or they didn't get ophthalmology, they'd take this GP job and apply again the following year, but at least then they've got a training job. And if they didn't get in, and some of them they actually found they really like GP, they might continue. I suspect this coming year, because alongside that, we've got a huge increase in the number of doctors that will be finishing foundation year 2, huge number of increase in doctors that sat and passed PLAB 2 last year compared to the year previously. That's been going up. I suspect this coming year, there'll be about 12,000 people applying for GP. The competition will be even more. I suspect it will get close to 3 to 1. All right. But if you just look at this last year, 30% increase in competition, having already gone up consistently. Okay. So remember these 4 stages. Stage 1 is application and long listing. Let me just go through the detail of that. The first thing is that you've got to meet the basic eligibility criteria. What are those? You must have 2 years clinical experience by the start date of training. You don't need to have that 2 years at the time you apply, because, for example, doctors that are in foundation programs got 2 years, right? They're applying this month. They're only just started their foundation year 2 in August. So they haven't got 2 years experience at the time they apply. But by August 2024, they will have finished their foundation year 2. So they'll have F1, 1 year, and F2. Similarly, doctors that haven't done foundation, you will need 2 years clinical experience, including internship, by the start of training. That could be anywhere in the world, but you need 2 years. If you will not have 2 years by August next year, you're just not eligible for this round. Get more experience, apply in the following year. Okay. You also need evidence of F2 competencies, and you need to have GMC registration and a license to practice by the start date of training. Again, if you haven't got that at the time you've applied, let's say, for example, you've sat your exams and you're going through the process, but you'll have it by the time you start, that's okay. Okay, so that's stage 1. Now, F2 competencies, there's a few different ways that you can provide that. So if you're in foundation program at the moment, all you need to do is say, I'm in foundation and I'm expecting to finish by August, and you just put the name of your foundation program. And then they won't ask you to provide any other evidence at this time. But if you get an offer, you get what's called a conditional offer, i.e. conditional that you finish the rest of your F2 rotations, get signed off, and get your foundation program certificate of completion, your FPCC. If for any reason you have to repeat a block because you didn't meet the competencies, you'd lose that offer because it's a conditional offer. Similarly, if you've recently completed foundation, so you completed it in 2021, 22, 23, you've got an FPCC, you just need to upload that when you apply. If you're currently in training in a different specialty, you'll have a national training number, and you can just put that in at the time you apply, and then you won't need anything else because they assessed your competencies when you applied for training. For anyone that can't meet those criteria, you have to provide something called a CREST form. So if you're not in training, you're not in F2, you're not recently completed F2 and got an FPCC, then you have to provide CREST. In order for someone to be able to sign you off for that, it's got to be a consultant or equivalent, and only one consultant can sign it. But you have to have worked for them at least 3 months full-time equivalent after January 2021. If you don't have enough experience after January 2021, again, you're just not eligible now. Get experience, apply next year. Okay. The competencies have to have been achieved in a job after January 2021, and every competence must be signed off. The other thing is that there's a new form this year, CREST 2024. That's the only form that will be accepted. So let's say someone applied in the last round, they would have used the old version, 2021. They need to get the new one signed off, or the application will be rejected. Another big change. Previously for GP, you could apply and then submit the form later. Not anymore. You have to submit at the time of application. If you don't have it, your application will be rejected. You won't even be invited to sit the MSRA. Okay. So this is what the CREST 2024 looks like. It says 2024 on it. This is just one of the pages, but there's a few pages. Every single one of the competencies has to be signed off, either personally witnessed by your consultant, or if they've taken evidence from a senior doctor, ST5 level, or another consultant, then they tick evidence received, and on the last page, they will put the details of who that doctor is and their contact details so that they can be verified. And then, everything's got to be completed, okay? And on our YouTube channel, there are videos on some of the common things that would lead to your CREST form being rejected. Feel free to watch those rather than me go through that in detail today. Okay, so that's stage one. Essentially, if you meet those eligibility criteria, you're going to have 2 years clinical experience, full GMC, F2 competency signed off at the time that you apply, or you're in foundation. Okay, for everyone else, it's at the time you apply. If you're currently in foundation program, you'll get a conditional offer if you get an offer, because you'll say, I will complete it, and I will send you the form by August, okay? If you don't meet any of those, your application will be rejected. Or if you make mistakes in the application, okay, your application may be rejected. Okay, so then let's say now you've been longlisted, you then get an invitation to book for the MSRA. So the MSRA has got 2 papers. The first paper is a professional dilemma paper, which is basically situational judgment test questions. You'll do 50 SJT questions in 95 minutes. Then you have a 5-minute break. Then the second paper is a clinical problem-solving paper, which you do immediately afterwards, which is 97 clinical questions in 75 minutes. At this stage, the SJT and clinical are equally weighted, 50% each. And there's a minimum band. So your initial score gets put into a band. Band 1 is a fail. Band 2, 3, or 4 is a pass, okay? But essentially, as long as you're not a band 1, which is a fail in either paper, the band is irrelevant. What matters is your total score. That's what will be used to determine your rank, okay? So the clinical paper, you're going to get roughly an equal proportion of questions from these areas. So there's about as many cardiovascular questions as dermatology, ENT, and eyes combined. About as many of these 3 combined as endocrinology and metabolic. About as many of these as pediatrics, about as many peds as all of these combined, okay? And the level of the questions is F2 level, okay? i.e. the level of knowledge expected of a foundation year 2 doctor. And then the professional dilemma, the SJT paper, there's 2 sections. So you have ranking questions where you get a scenario, there's 5 options or 4 options, and you rank them from best to worst. And then there's selection questions where there's 8 options, and you pick 3 options that go together that make the best way to approach that scenario. Okay, they're work-related scenarios assessing your decision-making and judgment mapped to 3 key domains: empathy and sensitivity, professional integrity, and coping with pressure. Okay, as well as being able to show positives for these things, some questions, it will be useful to have a good working knowledge of GMC ethical guidance, and having NHS exposure so that you understand how to put that into practice is really, really helpful. So how can you prepare for the MSRA? Well, the first thing is, allow enough time to prepare for both papers. So I sometimes see doctors that have done really well in one paper, but just failed the other paper. Even though their total score is good, if you fail one paper, you fail the whole thing. You will not get any rank at all. There's 0 chance of you getting an offer for GP, okay? The other thing is that nearly everyone that sits the MSRA in round 1 passes. So it's really important that you understand that this is not a simple pass-fail exam. Yes, you've got to pass to get a rank, but thousands of doctors that passed did not get an offer last year because their score was just not competitive, and the competition has increased significantly, okay? So what you want to do is not just aim for the minimum. Like sometimes people often ask me, what's the minimum score that got a job last year? That's not a good way to look at it, because you're aiming for the minimum last year. If the score increases this year similar to how it increased last year compared to the other, getting that score will mean you won't get a job at all. Anywhere, even if you put every single area, you won't get an offer. He said you should aim for the absolute best score possible, not just to pass, because passing doesn't mean you're going to get a job. As I mentioned, a couple of thousand doctors that passed did not get a job last year. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to start early, allow time to do both papers, and work to really understand the knowledge, consolidate the knowledge, work on your exam technique, your time management, practice lots of questions, do the reading as well, so that you really want to get the best score possible. You want to be competitive, not just pass. Passing should be a given. Beyond that, you need to do as well as possible, okay? And so you want to do a mixture of practice questions and reading to consolidate your knowledge. I often see in doctors that don't get a good score, what happened is that they waited until they got an invitation, or they waited until after they'd submitted their application before they started preparing. In a lot of cases, that's just not going to leave you enough time to be competitive. You might pass, but if you want to be competitive, ideally you've already started. If you haven't started, please don't delay. Start this week, okay? Because if you wait until after you've applied, and let's say you don't submit your application till, the second week of November, by that stage, the exams, remember, are starting from the 4th of January, okay? If you end up getting a date at the beginning of that, at that stage, you've got less than 2 months. If you wait until you get the invitation, which is going to be mid-December, you'll have less than a month to prepare. And you're competing against people who've been preparing already for 3 or 4 months. So please start now if you haven't already. And again, there's articles on, we've got a blog, GP Training Support. There's articles from doctors that have done really well, scored 600 plus. You can read through those if you want to have a look at, how can I do as well as possible, okay? In terms of reading, if you want to consolidate some knowledge, if you want to get a good broad knowledge, because it's not testing really in-depth knowledge about one subject, it's testing, do you have a good broad knowledge on lots of subjects? Oxford Handbook of Clinical Specialties, Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine are good base things. The only problem is both of them, a lot of the guidelines for management are now out of date because a lot of guidelines have changed since they were published. So, if you want to look up a specific guideline, NICE CKS or the NICE website is good for that. I'd recommend spending a day on the BNF because there's a lot of questions on therapeutics, on management of common drugs, on drug interaction, side effects, things like that. So, there's a good section at the beginning on pain management, prescribing in palliative care, on good principles of prescribing. And at the start of each chapter, there tend to be topical reviews about drug classes affecting, for example, the skin, or affecting the eyes, or affecting the nervous system or the endocrine system. Okay, so a day or two on the BNF, reading those summaries and that first section is really well spent. As I mentioned, if you're going to read a specific guideline, the NICE CKS website is good for that. It's quite concise. If you want to cover lots of guidelines quickly, an efficient way to do it is our clinical case cards, because we had a lot of doctors say, look, I'm working full time. Between practicing questions, I'm finding it difficult to read lots of NICE guidelines in full. I wish there was a way to do it quicker. So our team got together. The first edition we published, I think, was in about 2018. And we basically went through loads of NICE guidelines, looked at what are the questions mapped to, because the questions for the clinical paper are about investigations or diagnosis or prescribing or management or emergencies, okay? And then we summarize them to make them really easy to understand, concise, and easy to read and revise. So we have both like printed cards, okay, that come in a handy deck like this, okay? And we're now on the 12th edition. This was published August 2023. So they're up to date as of this year's guidelines, okay? For example, the Orbit bleeding score, which has replaced the HAS-BLED, which some of you might be familiar with from a couple of years ago. But there's also a digital edition, because the printed ones are only available for delivery within the UK. We do get a lot of doctors outside the UK that still want to access the learning. So we have the digital edition, okay? And then the mainstay of your preparation should be practicing questions. So we have over 2,200 questions on our MSRA question bank. They're mapped to the same curriculum headings that are used in the exam, but there's also a section on SJTs. There's mini mocks. There's 3 full clinical mocks. There's a full SJT mock, 2 mini SJT mocks, all included in that, and a study guide that you can download. You can use it on a phone, on a tablet, on a PC, okay? It'll take you about 100 hours if you want to cover all 2,200 questions, including the mocks. And then for those that want teaching covering a lot of the high yield topics and to develop exam technique, we have our 2-day MSRA grammar course, which includes the online questions in the bundle. So we've got a full day on the clinical, that's day 1 on the 25th of November. It's on Zoom. A full day on SJT. A lot of doctors that are new to SJTs, or that have sat the exam and failed on the SJTs, or didn't get a good enough score on the SJTs, or sat the exam and didn't get a good enough score for the whole thing. We often help a lot of people who are resitting to significantly improve their scores. And also a lot of people who they want to be really prepared because they're applying either for a really competitive specialty or competitive areas, or because of family, sort of, young kids in school, partner's got a good job that you don't want to move. If you're only applying to restricted areas, then, sometimes even a score of 500 won't be enough to get a job. You might need much more than that. Okay, and so people that really have got a reason why they want to get the absolute best score possible. So you can see some of the feedback here. If you book the full bundle, it includes access to the questions and access to the recording of both days, so 14 hours worth of learning for a month after the live session. So the live sessions are the 25th and 26th. Okay. Again, you can see some of the feedback. This doctor ended up they ranked 2nd in the whole country in psychiatry, 5th in the whole country in GP, got offered one of the only CAMS, that's a child and adolescent mental health jobs in Maudsley in London, and got their first choice GP offer in London as well. They took the CAMS job. Okay. So that's MSRA. Okay. Then we've got stage 3, the job offers. So remember, if you get band 1 in either paper, you've failed. You will not get any rank. If you get band 2 or more in both papers, you get a rank. But the reality is, if you get 2 band 2s, you're probably not going to get a job. Even this year, some doctors that got 2 band 3s didn't get jobs because of the competition. So the initial rank is based on your MSRA scores only. 50% SJT, 50% clinical. But for GP, if 2 doctors have exactly the same MSRA, so let me give an example. Someone's got 500, someone else has got 501. The one that scored 501 will get a higher rank. Okay, but let's say 2 doctors have both got 501. One of them had a higher score in the SJT and a lower score in the clinical. The one with the higher score in the SJT will be ranked higher, where 2 doctors have the exact same score for GP. Now, GP, 100% of your score is based on MSRA. That's what's going to determine your rank, and therefore, if you not just get a job, but is it your first choice job or your 100th choice job? There's no OSCE, there's no interview. No one's going to ask you to present a portfolio because there's no interview station. And when you get a job offer, it's at program level. You don't get an offer for the whole of West Midlands. It will be for the Birmingham and Solihull rotations. Or you won't get one for the whole of London. It'll be for Chelsea and Westminster rotations. Okay. So part 2, the key changes. So big changes. Remember, I showed you 2019, 2020. In those years, MSRA would just get you to the selection center, and then the OSCE actually had more weighting. Since COVID, they couldn't run the OSCE, so they just used the MSRA, and now that's permanent. Certainly for this year, they're sticking to that. It's confirmed that it will just be your MSRA score that will determine your rank for GP. Whereas you can see in most other specialties like ophthalmology, anesthetics, surgery, radiology that use MSRA, the MSRA is just to get you an interview slot. Then the interview makes up the bulk of your rank. For GP, it's all about MSRA. But what's really important is the last 2 years, the levels of competition have gone up significantly. And I expect it to be even higher next year for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. The next change is CREST. Only the 2024 form will be accepted. All old forms are invalid, no matter how recently it was signed. And then the other big change, there is no extended deadline. You must submit CREST for those that need it at the time you apply. Previously for GP, there was an option to say, I haven't got it now, but I will have it within the next couple of months. And you could submit it after. That's not possible anymore. If you don't have it at the time of application, your application will be withdrawn. So if you need CREST, please start getting it signed now. Don't wait till after you've filled in the whole application and then you realize, because then if your consultant says, I haven't seen you do this, 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 or this, you'll have to do some shifts in another department, do it, get some evidence, and then I'll sign you off. You might not have time. You might miss the deadline. Okay. The other change is that MSRA scores for GP can be carried over for 12 months. So let's say you get a good score, but there wasn't a job in the area that you wanted. You could say, okay, when I apply next time, there's an option to say, I'd like to use a score that I achieved within the last 12 months. You can carry it forward. You do that at the time of application. Now, at the time of application, if you have sat it recently, you will be given a choice. Do you want to carry this score over or do you want to resit? You can't do both. You can't say, I want to carry it over and resit in case I can get a better score. If you choose to carry over, that score will be used. You will not be able to resit. Now, the score will stay the same, but it's likely the same score will give you a lower rank because of competition increasing. If you decide to resit, the new score will be used even if it's lower than last time. You can't then go back to your old score. Okay. And then finally, deferral is now only allowed for statutory reasons. So you can defer for maternity, paternity, or if you're ill. You can't defer because a family member's ill, for example. So if you can't accept the offer and start at the time, and you don't have one of these, you'll lose the offer. You won't have the option to defer. That's gone now. Okay. So let's go through some frequently asked questions, and then I'll move on to how we can help, and then I'll take questions. Okay. So first question is about eligibility. A lot of people say to me, look, I won't have enough experience just by a few weeks. I'll have 23 months experience, not 24. I won't quite have the 2 years. Can I apply? Well, you can apply, but your application will be rejected, because in the application, you need to fill in all of your employment history, including current jobs and future jobs. And then they add it up. And if they see, oh, there's not 24 months worth of clinical experience here, they'll just tell you, you don't meet the experience requirement. Your application has been withdrawn. Then people will often ask me a follow-up, but my consultant signed me off for my CREST. That doesn't matter. That's a separate requirement. One is you need F2 competencies. Separate one is you need 2 years experience by the time you're going to start training. If you've got one but not the other, your application is still going to be withdrawn. Okay. Another common question people say, oh, my friend applied last year to GP and he didn't have it when he's applied. He told me I could just apply, sit the MSRA and then submit it after. Yeah, that was the case last year with CREST 2021. For CREST 2024, the rules have changed. Every specialty is the same now. You have to submit at the time of application. You cannot submit later. If you don't have it when you apply, your application will just be rejected. Okay. Can I apply if I don't have GMC yet? Yes, if you're going to have it by the time you start training and you meet all of the other eligibility. So let's say someone's sat their PLABs, they're going through the process, or they've passed PLAB 1, they've booked their PLAB 2 in the next few weeks, and they're going to have it in time. As long as you meet all of the others, you've got your certificate signed off, you're going to have 2 years experience, you could apply. Another common question, do I need UK or NHS experience? You don't need it. But I would strongly recommend getting at least 6 months NHS experience before you start GP training. And that's because from the day you start in GP training, pretty much, you'll have induction the first day or two. But basically, from week 2 onwards, you're going to start getting assessments as part of workplace-based assessment. Okay, it's one of the 3 parts of MRCGP. That one you get assessed in year 1, year 2, and year 3. And if you're still adjusting to a new country, you're not used to the system yet, and then you're starting to get behind on these assessments, what you might find is that you get asked to repeat a block, and then if you're still not at the standard, they might ask you to leave training. And if you get asked to leave training, you won't be able to apply to GP training again in the future. Okay. And so that same doctor, if they had 6 months to just, because when you're getting used to a new system, there's lots of other things that you need to do. If they got over that without the pressure, like did a non-training job to get familiar with the NHS, didn't have the pressure of assessments, and then got in, that same doctor would flourish. Okay. Another question, can a consultant outside the UK sign my CREST? Yes, as long as they're a consultant or equivalent, they've supervised you for at least 3 months full time, and they've, you've actually demonstrated all the competencies, then they could sign you off. Okay. If they're signing it from another country, they need to give you a copy of their license confirming that they're a consultant or equivalent, i.e. registration with the relevant medical council showing they're a consultant level, and to scan and attach that to the CREST form. Without that, again, it would be rejected. Then I have FAQs about the MSRA. How long does it take to prepare for the MSRA? This will depend on lots of factors. So how many hours a day can you spend? What other responsibilities do you have? What's your broad medical knowledge like already? How familiar are you with SJTs? How familiar are you with GMC guidance? What's your exam technique like? Do you see? Some doctors will spend 6 months preparing and still might not get a job. Others will spend 2 months preparing and they'll get a job. Maybe they've recently prepared for another exam and have read a lot of these things. And so, maybe they're already really good at SJTs because they sat the foundation SJT and are already familiar with the GMC guidance because they learned it for that. You see, the main thing I would say is it's really important to understand that your score is not about just how much you score as an absolute percentage. It's about how you score compared to other people. It's competitively ranked. Do you see? So the main thing is to start. If you haven't already started, start this week. All right. Another question, how many times can I apply or how many times can I sit the exam? There's no limit. You can apply as many times as you want. You can sit the exam as many times as you want. However, if you prepare really well, I hope you'll only have to sit it once. Another question, how much does it cost? Doesn't cost anything. There's no charge to sit the MSRA. It's a recruitment exam. Another question people ask is, I can't see how to book the MSRA. I've looked everywhere. That's because you can't just book this. This is not a standalone exam. You can't just sit it for the sake of it. This is part of the recruitment process. So you have to apply for training, and you can only apply when the applications are open. So remember, round 1, they open on the 26th of October, and you apply via Oriel. And again, on our YouTube channel, there's videos on how to apply via Oreo. And then remember, you submit your application, they look at it, they see, do you meet all of the criteria? They'll check your Quest form if you submitted it. Is it all correct? Only once they've longlisted you, then they'll send you an invitation to book in December for the exam in January. Okay, so you can't just book yourself. You have to wait till your application has been checked, you meet all the requirements, it's been longlisted, and then they'll give you an invitation. Then another question I get asked is the people that sat the exam in round 2, for example, or sat it in round 1, remember up to 12 months, you can, should I transfer my score or resit? Well, hopefully this will help you. These are the scores and the rank that they equated to in round 1 in 2022 and 2023. And what you'll see is for the same exact score. So if we go with 500, 500 is the mean score, okay, in the MSRA. Someone that got the mean clinical score and the mean SJT score would be given 500 exactly, okay? Well, that would have ranked you in 2022, 3,100 out of about 6,500 people that were ranked. Remember, there were a lot more people that applied, but some people fail. Some people don't meet the eligibility and don't even get to sit the exam. Okay, some people withdraw. Well, that same score in 2023 equated to 3,570 rank. Do you see? Nearly 500 places lower in the national ranking. Now, do you see? If you want a job somewhere popular, if you're ranked 3,570 and the areas that you want, let's say there's 100 jobs in them, they might all be gone from people who ranked 1 to 3,569. So even with a good score like 500, that's like, a decent score. That still might not be enough if you have got limited areas or you want somewhere popular. Okay. 2022, the person that scored 414, they ranked 6,101. They still got a job. Whereas last year, someone that ranked 6,433, this was the lowest person that I know of that got a job. They scored 437. Someone that scored even much higher than the person who got a job the year before, 425, because they ranked 7,000, they had no chance of getting a job. Okay. And if these trends continue, you see, scoring 500 might only give you a rank of around 3,900, 4,000. There's only 4,000 jobs. That might mean that even with 500, in most areas, you'll be on the waiting list initially, and you might not get a job until later when some people withdraw. If you score 600 plus, you would rank in the top 250 in 2022. In 2023, it's still a fantastic score, but you're suddenly top 300. 530, okay, would have been just over 2,100 in 2022, 2,400 in 2023. At the lower end, someone that scored 466 would have been 4,300 odd 2022. They're over 5,000 in 2023. You see, so like this same score next year might be 5,500. That means you're going to be on the waiting list. You want to have a job in the first round of offers. So what I'd say to you is, if you're happy to go absolutely anywhere, now a lot of people say that, but when it actually comes to it, then they find out, actually, I didn't realize this place is really remote and there's no airports near there, and I want to be able to travel back home, and actually I don't want this. But if you've done your research and you are absolutely happy to go anywhere, then if you've got 500 and that ends up being around 3,900, you're probably still going to get a job somewhere. If you've scored less than that, I'd recommend resitting it and work on improving it to 500 plus. If you want somewhere popular, like London, like Birmingham, Solihull, like Manchester, okay, or you're restricted in terms of geography because you can't move family, kids in good schools, and you're only going to be applying to a few areas between which there might only be a few hundred jobs, then really you want to be in the up here. You want to be aiming for here. So if you're lower than that, you might want to reset. Okay. It's entirely up to you. Okay. But I think it's really important to understand, because I sometimes see people who are being well-meaning and they say to their friends, oh, as long as you pass, you definitely get a job, because that was what it was in their year 5 years ago. That's just not the case. As I said, last year, over 2,000 doctors that passed did not get a job. Okay. So last year, 7,800 and something were ranked. They passed, but lots of those still didn't get a job. So how can we help you get your first choice job? Well, the first thing is we have a course on the 28th of October, which is just a few hours. But in that course, what we cover is all of the steps in a lot more detail than we can cover today, because I've only spent 40 minutes in the talk part. I'm going to spend the rest of the time taking questions. But in that 3 and a bit hours for the application, for example, we'll actually go through step by step all of the bits in the application that can lead to being rejected, the common mistakes from past years. We'll go through exactly how to fill in the CREST form. What are the common reasons why that would be rejected? We'll go through how to rank areas to maximize your chance of getting your first choice job. We'll go through what are the options to pick if you want to shorten your training and you've got past relevant experience, because if you don't select the right option at the time of application, you can't change it afterwards. Okay, so we'll actually go through the whole application and go through the eligibility and all of that in detail. Then we'll practice some clinical questions and some SJT questions, and we'll look at the domains in a bit more detail as to what are they exactly looking for. Then we'll look at how does the ranking work and the allocations work. We'll also cover, so you can go in with your eyes wide open, GP hot topics. What are the big changes? What are the different options once you get into training? What are the parts of MRC GP? What are the planned changes to GP careers over the next sort of 4 or 5 years that are going to impact you once you finish training? So you can go in with your eyes wide open. So that's only 3 hours. It's only £100. But if you book by the 21st, we've got an early booking discount. It's only £50 if you book before that. Okay. And then I already mentioned our 2-day grammar course. That's our most comprehensive preparation that we have. It's got 2 full days of teaching, over 14 hours, and you get the recording, and then you've got all of the questions, 2,200 questions plus mocks. Okay. If you were to book each day separately, because some people just want the SJT, they've got a great clinical score, they didn't do as well in the SJT, they just want to improve, or some people did well in the SJT, they didn't do so well in the clinical, maybe they've worked in one specialty for a long time, they want to consolidate 100 clinical topics in one day and work on exam technique, they might just come to one day. If you were to book all of these separately and then book the questions separately, it would cost £150 more than the bundle, which includes all of it at a discounted price. And you can see, as I said, we've helped lots of people get in those very high scores, or who really needed something competitive. This person, because of childcare, didn't want to move outside of London. So that's really all they could apply to, was London, the most competitive area, and they wanted child and adolescent mental health. Okay. This doctor wanted anesthetics. They got a really good score the year before, but didn't quite get enough after interview to get an offer. Came to the course, went up from 552 to 625. It's a phenomenal score. Just put them in the top 1% in the country. Okay. This doctor, they really felt that the course helped them understand the approach and change the approach to SJTs, because SJTs is largely technique rather than knowledge. Clinical is largely knowledge, right? If you put the hours in and cover the right material, you can get that. With SJTs, if you just do lots of questions, but you don't understand why you didn't get the marks, why was this wrong, why is this better, you could do lots of questions, you still might not improve. Whereas if you understand the how of it, then even practicing fewer questions, you're going to get there. Okay. Again, this doctor specifically found that teaching on the SJT is really helpful to demystify it. This Dr. 604, they got their first choice GP offer. This doctor, actually, this is from 2023. They got into radiology, GP, psychiatry, and obstetrics. They applied to all 4. They got offers for all 4. They got a very good score. But then you see, they also did really well at interview. They had a great portfolio. Because for radiology, obstetrics, the portfolio is worth more than the MSRA. Okay. And then I told you about our questions. And one of the feedback that we get a lot from people that have done more than one question bank is that ours is the closest to the real exam, once I've actually sat the exam, in terms of the layout of the questions, the level of the questions, the way it's written out. So you get this feedback a lot, similar to the exam. It's very similar to the one, so they felt more confident navigating. They like that, splitting each topic into 3. Okay, what they mean by that is, if I show you our online, we've got clinical, we've got SJT, we've got mocks, we've got a study guide. So with the clinical, you can see, so you do cardiovascular 1. When you've done those questions, do respiratory 1. When you've done those, do gastro 1, until you get to the bottom. Then go to the top and do cardio 2, rather than doing all the cardiology at the beginning. And then by the time you finish, you've forgotten these. You see, this way, you're getting and like when you do a question, we've got concise explanation, so you can cover a lot of material, because this exam isn't testing that you have a huge depth of knowledge. They're testing that you have a breadth of knowledge. So you want to cover lots of things, at F2 level, not a few things at membership level. Okay. Again, more similar than other question banks, because a lot of people will use multiple resources. This doctor, they got into anesthetics, scored 640, one of the highest scores ever. Okay. Again, what they liked is that they're clearly grouped by topic area, so it made it easy for them to know exactly what they've covered. Similar format and so on. Okay. And then the case cards. So we've got the digital version, we've got the printed version, we've got the bundle. Now we do have a bundle specific for GP that is all of those. It's the getting into GP training step-by-step course. It's the 2-day crammer plus the recording of that. It's all of the questions and mocks and the digital version of the case cards all in one bundle for $529. If you were to buy all of that separately, it'd cost you £200 more. Okay, so again, someone will post a link for that. Watch out for that. So part 3, really, this is where I'm just going to take questions for anyone that wants to ask anything about getting into GP training. Someone's asked, they've been working as a locum since 2 years intermittently. Does that count as 2 years clinical experience? If it's intermittently, then no, it's got to be 2 years full-time equivalent. So let me give an example. Let's say someone did 2 months, then they had a month off. Then they did 2 months, and they had a month off. In that 6 months, that's only 4 months of experience. Now, if you've got more than 2 years in total, that's fine. Okay. Someone asked, they've joined as an F2 in cardiothoracic surgery in September. Before this, they've completed 1-year internship. Will they be eligible for this program? No, because if you've only got 1-year internship and now you've started in September, by August, you won't have 2 years clinical experience. You're going to be a month short, aren't you? So get that experience, apply next year. Okay. Someone said, do you rank our choices via hospitals or cities? You rank areas. Within some areas, there's more than one hospital. Okay. For example, Birmingham and Solihull is one area. Within that, there's 4 hospitals within Birmingham and Solihull. You could be allocated any of them. Right? Someone said they started working in the NHS for a year, then they had maternity leave since they've been locum. Will you be eligible for the exam? Will you have 2 years clinical experience by August 2024? If you will, then you'll be eligible as long as you can submit your competencies. If you won't have 2 years, you won't be eligible. Someone said, for someone who scored low, is it wise for him to apply for rural areas? The reality is, if you score low, you could apply to everywhere. You're not going to get a job. So the answer to that situation is, don't, start preparing early so that you can get the best score possible. Okay. Once you've done that, once you've got your score, you should rank any area you would take a job in based on genuine preference. And then if your score isn't enough, you just won't get a job. You could resit and work on improving it next year. Okay. But, people with low scores, they could put everywhere. They're not going to get a job just because of the levels of competition. You have scores that in previous years would have got you a job in a popular area. They're not enough to get a job anywhere anymore. Okay. And that trend is likely to be continued. Someone said, how can you apply for less than full-time? After you accept an offer, you apply. You can select at the time of application, I'd like to train less than full-time. But once you accept an offer, you contact the deanery to arrange less than full-time. Okay. Someone said, what percentage of total applications got a job last year in GP? 10,500 applied, 4,000 got jobs. Okay. Is MSRA held all dates outside the UK? No, not every centre or location will have slots available on every date. You'll be able to see that at the time that you book. Someone said they got a 3 months gap recently. Will that matter? No, as long as you explain it in the application and as long as you still meet the experience that we talked about earlier. Someone said, does a doctor who's a refugee need a CREST? So if you're registered as a refugee and you have limited sort of opportunities to demonstrate CREST, there's a specific section you can fill in to explain that. They'll ask for evidence that you're registered, for asylum or refugee, and they might offer you other ways to show that. Okay. Someone said, if they just chose a specific area, will that narrow down your chances? It just depends on your MSRA score. Okay, if you just choose one area and you get a great score, you're still going to get the job. If you just choose one area and you haven't got a great score and all the jobs in that area are filled by people that scored better than you, you will have no job. Okay. But there's no point in putting a place down that you don't want to take a job in. You're just wasting time, aren't you? Someone said that they didn't do any quality improvement. Will I be eligible to get it signed off? No, every competence has to be signed off. One of them is that you've got to be involved in some kind of quality improvement project, whether that's an audit or a QIP or a QIA. If you haven't done that, you're not going to be able to get that signed off, then you're not eligible. Get involved in one, you've still got time. You could do a QIP in a month. You could get an audit done in 2 months. You've got until, the application closing deadline in November. So start now, you can still do it. If you still don't have it, then you won't be eligible. Get it done, apply next year. Okay. Someone said if they get a job in a remote area that's not one of their choices, could they move somewhere else later on? First of all, don't apply to a place that you don't want. Okay. Just don't put it down. Only put down places that you would be happy to spend the next 3 years or more. All right. If you put down a place, you're saying that if I get an offer there, I would take it. Now, if you then take it and you find that you want to move, it's not easy. So you could apply for an interdeanery transfer. Less than 6% of people that apply for a transfer and meet the criteria get one. So hardly anyone gets a transfer. You could apply again, but if you apply again and you've started training, you can only do that with permission from the deanery, and they'll normally only give that if there's exceptional circumstances. They have to fill in a specific form. If you don't fill in that form, your application will automatically be rejected. Okay. Someone said, is eMedica alone enough to get into training? Yeah, if you do a 2-day grammar course, and so that you've learned the topics and got great exam technique, and then you do all of these questions, that will take you 114 hours of study time. Okay, you'll be well prepared. If you also then want to consolidate knowledge and you've learned these guidelines, you'll be very well prepared. Beyond that, if you've still got time, do another question bank. You're getting exposure to additional questions. All right, and you've seen all of those examples of doctors that have done that and have not just got a job, they've got their first choice job. They've scored fantastically well. Okay. Someone said, when should I apply for a visa? That happens after you've got a job offer. That's part of the pre-employment checks, right? Someone said that, what's the best way to approach the SJT? If you are really familiar with SJT and GMC guidance, you could just practice some questions and read up the GMC guidance. If you're less familiar or less confident in the approach, I think you'll find a lot of people find helpful is the course. Whether you attend the full 2-day course or just the second day, which is a full day, 7 hours just dedicated to SJT. We look at what are the domains, how to spot the domains. We go through high challenge questions and detailed explanations so you understand why did you lose marks. Okay, we look at how to map questions to the right domains, because SJT is largely exam technique. Once you've got that and then you practice some questions, you'll be fine. Okay. Someone said, if there's any problems with their crest, will they give you a chance to correct it? Yes, they normally give you 72 hours to correct it. However, if you submit it right on the last day, you may not get any time to correct it. So this is why I recommend that you check everything before you submit it and get it right first time. And if not, then at least submit early on so there's time for them to ask you for corrections. Okay. There will be no extension to the deadline. After the last day of the application window, if you haven't submitted a corrected one by then, your application will be withdrawn. Okay. A few other people have asked about, do they need CREST if they're already in another training? No, you supply your national training number at the time of application. Someone said, how are slots for MSRA allocated? First come, first serve. Yeah, they release the invitations on a set date and it's first come, first serve. So those that, for example, don't book till the next day, there'll be limited slots left. Can you apply for you can apply for every area if you want in the whole of the UK, or you can apply to only one area. It's up to you. Ultimately, even if you apply for every area, if you don't score well, you won't get any jobs. Okay. Someone said, any tips for managing a job and preparing for MSRA? It's a great question. Start early. Okay. Because the reality is, and then be consistent. Set yourself some targets and do a little bit every day. So for example, if you were using our questions, remember I showed you earlier, you've got the different sections. Yeah. So, you could set yourself a target that, okay, one way or another today, I'm going to do all of cardio 1 and all of respiratory 1. Okay. And then, maybe you get up a little bit early before work and try and bang out. But to do each batch has got 30 questions. To read the question, have a go at it, then read the answer and explanation. It's going to take you some time, isn't it? Okay. You should allow about an hour if you want to properly read the explanations for each section. So, get up a bit early, bang one of these out. And then in the evening, I've got to find some time. I'm going to do this. Okay. Then the next day, I'm going to do gastro 1, then ENT 1. Then the next day, set yourself some targets and just be consistent. Do something every day. If you at least do that and you start early, then you can try to manage it. And then you've got to allow that some days you'll have a busy on call, you're too tired, and you do a bit less, you fall a bit behind. But at least you've got a plan. Do you see what I mean? Okay. Whereas, if you just try and do a few here and there, you don't really have any goals or any targets. What you might find is that you don't have time to finish all the questions. Never mind get to the mocks. All the mocks have completely different questions to the main bank, so that you're not repeating questions you've already seen, because that gives you a false sense of security, doesn't it? Okay. And then alongside, questions you get right, read the explanation there. If you get it wrong, you might want to get a better understanding. So then that's where you might read up the relevant NICE guideline, read the textbook, so you get a better understanding. Okay. Hope that helps. It's a really good question. Someone said, if my husband and I both pass the exams, are we able to get training at the same place? You can't link your applications. The best way to achieve that, ending up in the same place or at least close by, is make sure that you both rank exactly the same places in exactly the same order, and then just work your absolute hardest to get the best score possible, because then if you both get your first choice, that's going to be both in the same area, or at least if one of you gets your first choice and one of you gets your second choice, they're going to be close by. Okay. Someone said if they've got a diagnosis of ADHD or dyslexia or neurodiversity, can they get extra time? It depends. Okay. So in some cases, yes, you can. So for example, doctors with dyslexia, at the time of application, you put that you have additional requirements. You need to submit evidence. So, they will have had an educational psychologist report confirming what their specific neurodiversity or their additional learning needs are and what the recommended adjustments are. And usually you'll get 25% extra time, for example. Okay. But the answer is it depends on exactly your specific learning needs. Okay. Hope that helps. Can we see how many places will be offered in specific locations? You can see that at the time of application. It shows which areas have how many jobs when you apply. Someone's asked, last question, that do we have an app to use on Android? We don't have an app, but our question bank is fully responsive. So like it looks like this on a computer, but if you were to do it on a phone, it automatically reformats so that it's easy to just use your thumb or your finger to do it on a phone. You can see like the same question will look like this on a phone, whereas it will look like this. You can see on a big screen, it looks different than it does on a phone. It just reformats. So as long as you've got internet access, you don't need any app for it. You can use it anywhere with internet access. Okay. Someone said, how can they get a discount for the course? So if you're an MPS member, because MPS is sponsoring our course, MPS sent out recently a code. So check your email and you can use the MPS code if you're an MPS member to get a discount. Okay. For the bundle, you don't need a code. The discount automatically applied. All of these together, you automatically get a £200 discount compared to booking them all separately. There's no need for a code for that. I'll just show you. So if you go to the eMedica website, you can see the MSRA section. So like the 2-day course, if you go to just book day 1, it's £250. Just book day 2, that's £250. Then you need to book the questions separately because that's not included if you're just booking 1 day. If you book the top option, can you see? It's actually cheaper than just booking the 2 separate days, and you get access to the questions and the recording included. Similarly, with the Pass Plus, that's everything that we do. Okay, so the getting into GP training, the 2-day course, the recording, all the questions, the mocks, and the digital case cards until the end of January, it's already discounted. You don't need any code. Okay, if you were to book all of that separately, it would cost all of this. Okay, hope that helps. Okay, great. So that's the last question. Huge thank you to all of you. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you've got a clearer idea. Just biggest message I want to say to you, okay? And I leave you with this actually for those that haven't already left. That to succeed, we must first believe that we can. Set yourself high expectations. If those doctors can score high 500s, score 600s, okay? And they were working and managing, put in your mind, don't aim. Like if your aim is I want to just get an average score, I want to just 500, I'm happy with that. Then if, let's say you get a bit unwell or family member gets a bit unwell or you have some really busy shifts and you can't quite do as much study, you might fall short and not get your first choice. Aim for 600. Then if you're studying with that in mind, that I can do it, but I've got to work for it. It's not just going to be given to me on a plate. If you do that, then even if you fall short and there's some days you can't, you're going to get high 500s, you're going to 550, right? Okay. And then Malcolm Shabazz said, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So please start now. Don't wait till next month. Don't wait till December when the invitations come up. And now you've got 2 weeks to prepare, because it's not about just passing. Nearly everyone passes. You want to get the best score possible so that not only do you get a job, you want to get a job somewhere you're going to be happy for the next 3 years. Okay. I want you to get your first choice job. So please start early and just be consistent. Do a little bit every day. Read one guideline, one case card, cover one topic, do at least one set of questions every single day. Without even realizing it, if you're sitting it on the last day of the January exam, you've got just under 3 months. Okay. If you can do an hour every day and then a couple of hours on the weekends when, or days when you're off, do 3 or 4 hours, you can cover 100 hours. That's how long it will take to cover all of our questions and mocks once with reading the explanations. But then, you might want to revise some topics in a bit more detail, do a bit more reading. So really, you want to allow a bit more. So, but if you can just be consistent, at least do an hour. All right. have a target, be consistent, then, you know, you can do it. These doctors did it, you can do it. And then come offers time, I'm going to get an email from each of you that reads like this, or that reads like this, or that reads like this. You know, you've got a fantastic score, you've got your first choice job, and you're set up for the next 3 years. Okay, so I do hope to see some of you at one of the courses. If not, I might see you once you're in training, because we help lots of doctors get through MRC GP, AKT, SCA. You know, we run courses sometimes with deanery, so some of you, I might see you at some deanery teaching. But, you know, I hope this is not the end, but the beginning of our journey together. And I'm really passionate about helping doctors that want to be good GPs to get there and become great GPs. So thank you so much for giving up part of your evening. I hope it's been helpful. Huge thank you to the eMedica team for answering questions, dealing with queries, looking after the Q&A. Thank you so much, Masuda, Tuba, and everyone else. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Keep pushing, keep going, prepare, and you will succeed. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. All the best with your application.